just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
The most significant day of this conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Heavy vehicle.
Why only in America?
People want their country to work.
Just want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
Tonight, Israel's army chief tells troops we're striking Lebanon to prepare for a possible ground invasion. Keir Starmer says the time for British citizens to leave is now. For a third day, Israel has unleashed airstrikes on Lebanon, targeting Iran-backed Hezbollah militants who've been firing back into Israel. The Prime Minister is in New York at the United Nations Security Council, where he's been warning the region is on the brink. And while in the United States, the Keir has sat down with our political editor, Beth Rigby. He's told her he accepted a donation worth £20,000 for the use of a flat so his son could study peacefully for his exams.
Do I want my son doing his GCSEs walking through journalists and protesters? No, I don't. I promised him, I promised my wife and I promised our children would protect them, and we will.
Also tonight, the Labour Party conference comes to a close with a tricky moment, with members in Liverpool voting to reverse the cut to the winter fuel allowance. And as the party faithful depart the city with a rendition of the anthem, the red flag, we'll ask if it suits the current Starmer era. All that and more with Mick Lynch and Ed Vasey, who'll be with us for the next hour. It's Wednesday, I'm Sophy Ridge live from Westminster, and this is the Politics Hub. Hello, good evening. Omar Bradley, the US World War II general, reportedly once said that in war, amateurs talk strategy, professionals talk logistics. And right now, the UK government is facing a huge logistical problem. The Israeli army chief has said the strikes in Lebanon are to prepare for a possible invasion. And now the UK government is telling Brits that they need to get out now. Now, getting its citizens out of danger is a problem that a government really can't afford to mess up. We saw the chaos that happened when British soldiers and civilians were evacuated from Afghanistan in 2021. The logistics were not easy and, frankly, they weren't great either. That's why the language we're seeing from Number 10 is so strong. Keir Starmer telling British people to get out of Lebanon now while there are still commercial flights. He knows that if things do escalate, it will become increasingly difficult to get people out and to keep people safe. And at that point, every British national remaining in Lebanon becomes a real problem. Well, let's hear, shall we, what the Prime Minister said a little earlier.
I'm very worried about the escalation and calling for all parties to step back from the brink to de-escalate. We need a ceasefire so this can be sorted out diplomatically. But I have a very important message for British nationals in Lebanon, which is the time to leave is now. The contingency plans are being ramped up, but don't wait for those. There are still commercial flights. It's very important that they hear my message, which is to leave and to leave immediately.
Well, our correspondent John Sparks has been speaking to British nationals who are trying to follow the Prime Minister's advice.
I'm travelling because I have to. But all my family, they're still there in South. So it's very sad and very... Well, nothing we can do, actually. We have to just call them and try to see how they're doing.
Were you there when the fighting, when the bombing started?
Yes.
What did you see? What did you experience?
Well, explosion everywhere. It's just been hitting and I can hear them all day, all night long. Yeah, actually, since 2 days we have to, myself and some part of my member of my family, we have to escape from south toward Beirut.
Well, in a moment, we'll speak to our political editor, Beth Rigby, who's in New York with the Prime Minister for his appearance at the United Nations. But first, we can go to our Middle East correspondent, Alistair Bunkle. And Ali, the Israeli army chief has said that they're striking Lebanon to prepare for a possible invasion. How seriously do you think we should take that threat of a possible invasion?
Well, I think there's military logic in what they're doing, in terms of airstrikes. A military often softens up their enemy before they send in the ground troops. So that could certainly be what the Israeli Air Force are doing at the moment. We know that the Israeli army is prepared to go in as and when the order is given, and we know that the military and the Israeli government have signed off plans to invade Lebanon. We just don't know when that order will be given or if it will be given. Herzer Halevi, who is the chief of staff, was talking to troops up on the northern border here earlier today. They'd just finished an exercise. I'm guided by sources in the IDF that an invasion is not imminent, but it is getting closer. I have to say, I think it would be a slightly strange thing for a general to flag up so blatantly an imminent invasion if it was to happen in the coming hours. And I think there are some other factors at play as well here. Israel's had a very successful week or so, but it is starting to run out of cards to play if it wants to keep escalating the situation further, and Hezbollah are continuing to fire into Israel, so Israel needs to keep the pressure up on Hezbollah. Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, is still set to go to New York, I think either tonight or tomorrow morning. His office tells me it's changing literally hour by hour, but he'll address the UN General Assembly there, and if he does go, he's expected to remain there until Sunday. So do we expect that the Israeli military would invade Lebanon with him out of the country? I don't think so. And there are some signs, some early signs of perhaps a diplomatic effort now coming to the fore. The rumours here are that Joe Biden will present, maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow, a proposal for a pause in the fighting, presumably to allow more room, a bit of calm for more diplomacy to go on. Now, the US have not got a good track record of trying to broker ceasefires with Israel and their enemies over recent months, but nevertheless, we gather Netanyahu has sort of given the green light that he is willing to listen to that proposal. The other tactic at play here is that Netanyahu might well be expecting that Hezbollah would reject any proposal for a pause, and if they did, then that would give a subsequent ground invasion of Israel. If that order were to be given, it would give it greater legitimacy.
Alistair, thank you very much indeed. Alistair Bunkle speaking to us there. We can talk now to Beth, who's been travelling with the Prime Minister. She joined us live from the United Nations in New York. What's the Prime Minister's message been?
Well, Sophie, you saw overnight the Prime Minister now calling on all British citizens in Lebanon to leave immediately, and he was really keen to press home that point this morning when he did interviews with broadcasters, reiterating the need for people to leave now. The UK is planning to send over 700 troops to help with that evacuation. 10,000 British citizens, we think, are in Lebanon. The Prime Minister wants them out. So this obviously a massive issue here at the UN, at their General Assembly. The Prime Minister also meeting with President Zelensky earlier this day. The Ukrainian president coming here with his victory plan. What he wants to do is to try to convince President Biden to allow him to start using missiles, something that the UK into Russia, something the UK is always also pushing for. So let's see if there's any developments on that. But a Prime Minister here warning that the Middle East is on the brink and urging everyone to pull back. This is what he told the UN Security Council earlier today.
We need an immediate ceasefire between Israel and Lebanese Hezbollah and the implementation of a political plan which allows Israeli and Lebanese civilians to return to their homes to live in peace and security. That security will come through diplomacy, not escalation. There is no military solution here.
And Beth, you of course got the chance to sit down with the Prime Minister, interview him a little earlier today. How did that go?
Well, Sophie, normally we do these interviews back in the UK, but the Prime Minister flew straight to New York from party conference for these UN meetings. So we did the interview here, and I did focus it on domestic issues, and namely really on the row around freebies. The Prime Minister has seen his poll ratings fall. Recent polling out actually this afternoon suggests 3 out of 4, I hope you can hear me, there's quite a big siren in the background. 3 out of 4 members of the public think he should stop taking freebies. And I wanted to ask him about that and whether he was worried that the optics of this row was undermining his message about wanting to be a Prime Minister, putting government in the service of the public rather than looking to be in their own self-service by taking freebies and getting privileges. And I have to say, Sophie, it was quite a tense interview. The Prime Minister seemed quite angry at times with the line of questioning. He explained that there were human stories about why he had accepted these donations. Not least, he talked about football matches and going there with his son. And he also talked about his decision to accept accommodation worth £20,000 during the general election. And that was, he said, so his son could go and study for his GCSEs away from their family home where there is a lot of press outside. He said, I wanted my son to do as well as he could. I wanted to protect my son. What I would say about all of it, Sophie, is that viewers should take it, their own decisions about whether they think it's reasonable or not reasonable. I think people have different views. The thing that struck me was what I was asking the Prime Minister really was not about whether he broken rules, he hasn't broken rules, but what he thought the optics of this were. Did he understand why some people thought he shouldn't accept these donations or were uncomfortable about it? When you can watch the exchanges for yourself and see what you think. Prime Minister, thanks for joining us on Sky News today. During the general election, you campaigned on a message of change, of doing politics differently and making yours a government of service. and yet you find yourself caught in a row over the huge amount of freebies you've accepted while leader of the opposition, £107,000, far more than any other MP. Do you acknowledge that this has undermined your message and reputation, and are you sorry about that?
Well, I think it's important just to put it in its context. Any gift or donation to a politician has to be declared. Everything I've had has been declared. And sitting behind the numbers are some human explanations. So quite a lot of that money was for tickets for football matches. I pay for my own tickets at Arsenal. I've got season tickets. Unfortunately, I can't sit in the stand anymore for security reasons. And the club have said, well, in which case, be our guest in the director's box, if and when there's space. Now, no money changes hands. You can't buy a ticket, but then the register says, well, what's the amount that would be the equivalent, even though you didn't buy the ticket, and that has to be declared. Now, that means if I didn't do that, I couldn't go to Arsenal. I go with my boy. Second example I'll just give you is some of that money was for the loan of a flat during the election period. No money changed hands.
Yes, and that was related to your son.
Yeah, there was no cash adjustment. We had a situation where the election was called, not when we expected it, I think most people. My son happened to be in the middle of his GCSEs. That means there are a lot of journalists outside the front door and in the street. I'm not complaining about that, but if you're 13, as my girl is, if you're 16, as my boy is, that's quite hard to navigate when you're concentrating on GCSEs. Now, hear me out, because you put it to me.
Yeah.
So I said, we're going to get you out of here and get you somewhere where you can just study and get to school and back without having to go through all of that. And that's when someone said, well, in which case, I can make this flat available to you. It's safe, secure, he can get on with the job. No money exchanged hands, we didn't. No money exchanged hands, but for the registrar... No, but you've put it to me, let me just finish. But for the registrar's purposes, he says, well, I know you didn't pay and nobody gave you money, but let's work out what it would have been worth if it had been a commercial transaction, which it wasn't. So I'm not saying, you know, of course I understand why you ask questions, etc. But I do think sometimes it's important just to sort of look behind the number and say, what was the human story behind some of this? And I wasn't going to let my son fail or not do well in his GCSEs because of journalists outside our front door. We also, as you know, had protesters outside our front door.
Sometimes, do you find these questions hard?
Do I find protesters outside my front door when our children are in there worrying? Yes, I absolutely do. Do I want my son doing his GCSEs walking through journalists and protesters? No, I don't. I promised him, I promised my wife and I promised our children would protect them, and we will. But in both those cases, no money changed hands. It was simply a gift from Arsenal.
It feels to me you're a bit defensive. Like, do you feel you're being misunderstood on this, that we shouldn't be... that there are reasons behind all these expenses?
I think it's really important you ask me the questions. That's why the declarations are there. But, you know, this is just... you know, I think behind some of these numbers is a human story, and it's all important sometimes just to explain what the story is.
But I want to go back to the framing of it, which is, you have said that we are all in this together. You said in your speech yesterday, it's a shared struggle, a project that says to everyone this will be tough. To coin a phrase, we're all in it together. And for some of it, whether you like it or not, it will look to some people that we're not all in it together, that because of your position, you get privilege and freebies that other people don't have access to. Take GCSEs. There will be some people that would also want a private place, have a different environment where they would like their child to go so they could have a better opportunity. Do you see how it looks to some people that there's one rule for you in terms of being able to claim this stuff that other people don't have access to?
Well, I think that's why the rules are there to declare it. But look, every day...
Do you get it, though?
Every day...
Do you get how it looks?
If you're putting to me, Beth, that I should have stayed in my Kentish Town home and disrupted my son's GCSEs, that was the right thing to do, then I think you should put that to me.
OK. Well, you're saying that you shouldn't have stayed in the home because you wanted to protect your boy.
I wanted him to be able to do his GCSEs, and any parent would have made the same decision. I don't wake up every morning thinking about that. I wake up every morning thinking I've got a mandate to change the country. I've got a mandate to improve living standards. I've got a mandate to improve the health
service. I'm trying to talk to you about the optics of it, Prime Minister. If I go back to what you claimed in opposition, 4,500 on holiday accommodation, 16,000 on clothing, nearly £3,000 on glasses, over £35,000 in football, concert tickets, rugby, the races, over £17,000. There might be human reasons for it, but do you understand the optics of it when you are the Prime Minister that said you were going to do politics differently? It looks like you're claiming loads of freebies.
Well,
do you get it, even if you don't agree with it?
I've given you my explanation, and I can't improve on that. If people think that my decision to try and protect my son's GCSEs was the wrong one,
but
they're free to do so.
There's lots of other things in that, but it's not about your son.
If people feel that I should insist on sitting in the stands at Arsenal, notwithstanding the cost to other people.
The clothes, the concert tickets, there's other things in that.
Well, on the clothes, I mean, look, in the general election campaign, we're busy, and lots of people want to help, and in this particular instance said, well, I can help with sorting out some clothes. In opposition, that's one thing. You know, what I would say now is I won't be doing donations for clothes again. There won't be any declarations like that. But look, I think that's a matter of judgment for individuals. And Beth, I might just gently say, Sky invite us to quite a lot of hospitality events. Your summer party is a great party costing thousands of pounds, and you invite me every year. Presumably you want politicians to continue to come, and you know, part of that is how politics, and that's why the declarations are really important.
What I'm trying to get to, which I think I can see, but perhaps you can't, is that for some people out there, it looks like you were going to do politics differently, and now they're seeing that you're claiming for lots of freebies, and it feels less of a clean break, and to some, a sort of continuity Johnson of getting rich friends to pay for stuff.
Well, I've given you the explanation.
But do you just not accept that? Am I just...
I understand why you're asking
questions. Page?
I understand why you're asking questions. Of course you're right to ask questions, and because you've asked questions, I've given my explanation about why it is that I don't go in the stands at football now, why it is that I wanted to protect my son in his GCSEs, why it is that, you know, my judgment call has been that when you've invited me to the Sky party costing thousands of pounds every year, I've accepted that invitation and come along.
And you would see that as a work event? Would you see a Taylor Swift concert as a work event, for example?
I think it's a judgment call for each
So you
MP.
don't want to change the rules?
I think it's a judgment call for each Member of Parliament.
So you're not going to change the rules, just to be clear? You don't think the rules need reviewing in light of some of the backlash?
Well, on the question
of the public think you should not accept these tickets?
It's a judgment call. In relation to clothing, then I have made the decision that I won't accept donations for clothing. That was something that was done in opposition. We're now in government, so you won't be seeing those declarations.
OK, Prime Minister, one other thing. Conference has just voted against the emblematic policy of your government cutting winter fuel allowance for pensioners. It's been rejected by your own party, your first conference as Prime Minister, and they have voted you down. It's not just Labour, it's the country that's not with you on this policy. It's bad politics.
Well, I do understand why people are concerned about it, but we inherited a £22 billion black hole. That's money that was off the books that the last government hid from the public. That's got to be dealt with in year. We've taken a decision to deal with it because that will stabilise the economy. That means we can commit and through you I recommit to the triple lock, which means that for pensioners, state pensioners, there was £900 extra this year, £460 predicted next year, and so on and so forth, which is why by stabilising the economy, we can ensure that pensioners are better off with a Labour government. And that's why we've taken this decision. But it is important that, through you, I say, for all those that are entitled to pension credit, that they take up that credit, because then, of course, the payment is guaranteed for winter fuel allowance, and also there's the benefit of the credit itself. So those are the two things that I think are really important on this.
Final question, mate. You said in your speech, no return to Tory austerity. To make it clear, are you considering changing borrowing rules in the budget to allow you to borrow billions more for investment in public services? Is that your answer to no return to Tory austerity?
Well, there will be no return to Tory austerity. We saw the damage that has done, and we're still feeling the damage that has done. Obviously, and I'm not going to get ahead of the budget, I've said growth, economic growth is our #1 mission. And, we are talking to investors across the world about investing here in the UK, the conditions and the stability. And therefore, any public element of that will be alongside private investment.
But you're not ruling out, so you're considering changing borrowing rules?
I'm not going to get ahead of the budget.
In principle?
I'm not going to get ahead of the
but
budget
you will
through...
borrow to invest?
Look, I'm not going to get ahead of the... Well, governments have always borrowed to invest. The question is whether we can trigger in the private investment that we need. And private investors say to me, what matters most is economic stability. That is the thing they consider over and above all else, which is why we're taking the tough decisions now to ensure we've got the economic stability that we need.
Right, let's bring in our duo for the evening, shall we? Mick Lynch, the General Secretary of the RMT Union, and Lord Ed Vaizey, the former Conservative Minister. Great to have you both on the programme. Ed, what do you make of this freebie row, the donation row?
Well, I'm afraid I'm on the Prime Minister's side on this one. I think Beth asked us to make up our own mind depending on his responses to the interview, and I think his responses are reasonable. I think, first of all, it's the rules working. It is transparent. People know what he's been up to, and they can take a view, as Beth Rigby said. But I think the key argument here is, do people get undue influence? Is Arsenal going to get rid of the football regulator because Keir Starmer's an Arsenal fan who goes to Arsenal games? Does Wahid Ali have more influence on the Labour Party, having been a Labour peer since 1998 and a Labour Party activist for 33 years because he helped the Prime Minister with his clothes? Having said that, I do totally accept, and Keir Starmer has an issue here, perception is reality. And I was reading somebody commentating today saying that he's fumbled the ball in the sense that maybe he should have just come out and just said, I get it, a bit like what Beth was asking him, I get it, with hindsight I shouldn't have done it, it won't happen again, I totally understand, these are the reasons I've done it, but I hear what people say. Now, there is an element where, and you can tell from the way he's kind of answering the questions, where he thinks, look, I'm putting perfectly reasonable points to you, anyone should get it. But public perception, I'm afraid, is not like that, and it is damaging the more this goes on for him, and that's just a political fact.
You can see the exasperation slightly in the interview, I think. What do you think, Mick? Because I guess Keir Starmer did make a big point in his speech at conference, didn't he, that he was all about service, this was a government of service. Do you think, I guess if you're kind of setting yourself up as that kind of virtuous Prime Minister, unlike others, then you've got to be whiter than white? Yeah,
you've got to live your values, and if he wanted to go out and buy hair shirts, I'm sure that he'll probably find them good value now, because he's being accused of looking good and getting things sorted, getting some of the logistics that is in your own family life about his son. I know he's an Arsenal fan, regrettably. He goes there every other week, and now he can't sit with his mates. That's just a fact of life. Should he have to pay for that himself? I don't think so, but it's got to be registered at the full value. I don't think these are the best examples of corruption we've heard in Westminster. They're not that egregious, but he's got to live his values, and it doesn't look great. He's got to get by it. I think the press have succeeded in getting him onto this ground, which is really uncomfortable for him. And it's not dealing with the important issues we've got. We've seen all the international stuff that he's got to be involved in. He wants us to take a principled stand on that, I hope. But he's got to deal with the winter fuel payments. And those two things coupled together have not looked good. So there are some missteps. And those in the Labour leadership, in the Labour spin departments that thought we will get in and it will be different, are coming up short a bit in the last, 4 or 5 weeks, halfway through the length of this government. It hasn't gone the way they expected it to be. They thought it'd just be efficiency, grown-up politics, getting the message through, and it's not. The press are out there waiting to get you.
There is this whole thing as well about glass houses, which I should have said earlier, which is, if you're going to take chunks out of Boris Johnson for his wallpaper, and thankfully I didn't, I supported Boris Johnson in redecorating the Downing Street flat. I think it's a good thing. I'd love to see private donors pay to redecorate the whole of Downing Street, frankly. But you do, that is another reason why Keir Starmer is in trouble. If you give the impression that the Tories are mired in sleaze, and I accept there will be the PPE contract rejoinder probably, but that's a whole different issue.
Labour did that as well.
That's a whole different issue. But if you're going to take chunks out of Boris Johnson for getting somebody to help him redecorate his flat, it then doesn't look good. You're then on quite shaky ground.
What Labour sometimes say, though, is that, blimey, we're only getting all this because we declared more than the Conservatives did.
Yeah, I mean, that is the frustration. And, it takes me back, dare I say it, PTSD, the expenses scandal. There were a lot of hurt and angry MPs who thought if only the public understood, and obviously there were some who criminally defrauded the taxpayer, but there were others who said, look, this was within the rules. Within the rules doesn't cut it. And it is the rules. We are a very transparent country, and thankfully we are relatively free from corruption. So there is a lot of transparency, and is a gift, rather like freedom of information, to journalists, but it doesn't cut it with the public. The public make up their mind, as Beth Rigby said, whether it's fair or unfair.
You mentioned the winter fuel pay cut. How much of a big issue do you think this is for this government?
It's a really big issue because they said they wouldn't bring back austerity or continue austerity. That is an austerity measure. People are having a benefit cut, and there will be people that suffer directly as a result of that. I think they could have done more in the last couple of weeks to mediate that, come up with some clever ideas that answer the criticism without having to completely reverse out of the parking position they've got into. There is a case about wealthier people getting the allowance. Some people don't want it. Some people give it to charity. Some people just go down the pub, I suppose, with that money. So there should be a halfway house. And if you've got a lot of clever people in Westminster, surely they could think of a way to get the government off the hook on this. I can't see why they're so stuck. But they also want to give a message to the city following Truss's disaster that they're serious about public expenditure. But I think they've gone too far on that. I think people would have understood if they'd come up with a proper mediation strategy to try and get themselves out of a hole.
Do you think they realised what they were about to walk into with it?
No, I don't think they did. And this is the sin of professional politicians. They don't always have the connection with the public, and even going around the country in your battle bus, being in the media bubble, as some people are, doesn't give you that connection of what does somebody just above the state pension, maybe with a small pension from an employer or from their partner's occupation, they could be really struggling, and they may be budgeting for this money. There's got to be a way to get those people that money, and clever politicians would come up with a solution.
What's your take on it?
Well, it's a difficult issue, isn't it? I mean, because there's an element of... I hope I don't sound too cynical here, but, Gordon Brown came up with the winter fuel payment as a sort of political fix back in the day, and life was, before the winter fuel payment, people were not kind of freezing to death. It didn't solve a particular problem. And also the winter fuel payment has gone down in value over the last 25 years because of inflation, and people haven't kind of crusaded to increase it. But the minute you take money away from people, you cause a problem, and particularly if it can be very emotive. And it takes me back to George Osborne mucking about with child benefit and completely overcomplicated the system. I think child benefit was a very straightforward benefit which worked very well before George started to meddle with it. And then out of the blue with George's budget, you remember George Osborne's budget, the pasty tax. Who saw that coming? I think Labour have made a misjudgment only in the sense that they announced it early. It could have been part of the budget, but then again, if Rachel Reeves had put it in her budget, she might have blown up her budget.
But there is a criticism from the left, which Sharon Graham put today. Nothing has happened about the super rich, and they've got to get to grips with these fiscal rules. And what I've said in my little speeches on the fringe, if you keep Tory rules, I'm sorry about this, you're going to get Tory outcomes. If you restrict yourself to that austerity budget, there must be some austerity coming, because the growth tap isn't going to be switched on for quite a while. So you can't compensate by having growth, and I don't see how the pensioners are going to benefit from that. Just because the economy grows and better wages, it doesn't mean that pensioners, this particular little trap of people, several million people, are going to benefit from building bridges or rebuilding the infrastructure or getting clean water or whatever it is they come up with.
OK, thanks very much. Really interesting, wide-ranging chat there. Thank you. You're watching the Politics Hub. Coming up. Can the government learn the lessons from the past in getting British nationals out of Lebanon? And does an Israeli escalation against Hezbollah risk all-out war with Iran? I'll speak to the UK's former ambassador to Iran.
We're rolling.
Welcome to the world.
Our new podcast, starting now. It's very exciting. Every week, we'll be reporting from the world's trouble spots.
We get to hold those in positions of power accountable, and we get to ask the questions that the audience, the listeners, want to know about.
And that's why it is so important that people tune in, come along for the road, come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
Evacuation, you must leave!
For many people, Harvey is far from over.
Christchurch has been changed forever by what happened here. There was a river of blood coming out of the mosque. That's a scene that you don't forget.
Ida has certainly left its mark on New Orleans.
It just feels heartbreaking.
We help you understand the world with us. We are standing on the supply line right into the heart of America's opioid crisis. I've reported from around the world and around the UK. Are you trying to run me over, Sir Philip?
No, go away.
Look like it, sir. Will you respond to those who made accusations, Sir Philip?
Can you go away?
Joe Biden knows the celebrations are over, and this is a country in crisis.
You don't want to be remembered this way. You always want to be remembered as something positive.
It is almost impossible to predict where these fires will go next. This gives you an idea of the strength of those winds, strong enough to bend and twist metal.
Do you regret the tweet, Gary?
There's no sign, publicly at least, of either side being willing to give ground.
How do you reassure the public that all of these mistakes wouldn't be made again?
I'm Greg Milam, and I'm Sky's Chief North of England correspondent.
Our app gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos, analysis up at 6%. Podcasts, watching us live.
Joins us live.
All in one place. And all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Hello, welcome back. Well, with fears growing of an all-out war between Israel and Hezbollah, the UK is accelerating plans to evacuate British nationals from Lebanon, saying the time to leave is now. Well, while some flights are still operating in and out of Lebanon, the Foreign Office is preparing to evacuate Britons from Lebanon to nearby Cyprus, if that should change. I should also say that 700 additional troops are being sent to Cyprus. That's as the UK bolsters its presence alongside the RAF base. I think we should be able to show you on the map, but it's basically, here we go. Yeah, there we go. That's the base there. Now, they join the logistics support ship RFA Mounts Bay and the HMS Duncan Air Defence Destroyer, which hopefully we should be able to show you, with aircraft and transport helicopters on standby, those two there. Well, the escalating Middle East conflict is sure to feature in tomorrow's newspapers. We'll have our extended press preview from 10:30 p.m. this evening. That's with tonight's news and tomorrow's headlines. Joining us will be the Mirror's Associate Editor, Kevin Maguire, and the Telegraph's Deputy Comment Editor, Annabelle Denham. I'm very pleased to say that joining us now to discuss this is Rob McCare, who served as the UK's ambassador to Iran, in addition to a number of other roles within the Foreign Office. Great to have you here. So how important is it, if you're a British national, to leave Lebanon now?
I think the messaging couldn't be clearer that people need to leave now. And I think, having seen some of these evacuations in the past, I think that people need to remember that, you know, if you're evacuated from your home in the UK because of some disaster, then all of the environment, all the blue light services and everything's all under control of the authorities. But if the government's trying to get you out or trying to do an evacuation in a foreign country, none of that is under the control of the government. And even with the most professional, best planned operation, it will be messy, it will be confusing, it will be frightening, and people shouldn't be relying on an evacuation if it gets to that.
That's interesting. And you say that people can't rely on the evacuation. Is that because it could be very difficult, I guess, to get people out in the future?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, in a crisis, the Foreign Office, the military, the other agencies across government will throw themselves into doing what they can to help the British people out there. And that means, obviously, because there aren't a lot of people on standby doing this, you mean you have to scale up quickly, work across government, have the right training in place, have the right plans in place and exercise them. And fortunately, the Foreign Office does have a fantastic team who have done all of that, because I know I used to work there. But it would be a mistake to think that it can go like clockwork, because these things can't.
Yeah, you talk about your own experience handling this, because, of course, you were the Director of Consular Services at the Foreign Office, I think, just after the 2006 evacuation of Lebanon.
Yes.
Were there sort of lessons that you'd learned there that, are relevant here?
Yeah, I think there were lessons from all of these incidents that happened, and that was a classic where I think there were more people to evacuate than were expected at the time. So now there's an effective, obviously technology allows a more effective registration process now, which is activated on the Foreign Office website. But lessons about how to communicate with people, how to get those messages out to people to leave under their own steam while they can. And although it's getting more difficult to leave Lebanon, clearly there's a reason why ministers and the Prime Minister are saying, get out now.
Yeah. If there's a commercial flight, get on it, basically.
Yeah, or a ship or a land route or whatever you think is safe, yeah.
700 troops sent to Cyprus. What's that about? What's going on there?
I mean, I think you're seeing what the military do, what they do so well, which is to prepare for all contingencies. And there's clearly a potential need to have support to some sort of evacuation operation. I don't think it in any way implies that a decision's been taken. As I say, I'm no longer in the system, so I don't know. But I think that we're not at that stage. But the military are really good about making sure they've got the resources in place to do what they need to do. It's still not a lot in terms of evacuating thousands of people.
Yeah, but it is still something, like you say. So you're obviously the former ambassador to Iran. Can you just kind of talk us through the relationship between Iran and Hezbollah? Because not everyone's going to be, I guess, as up to speed on it as you clearly are.
Well, Lebanese Hezbollah is the longest standing of Iran's regional partners, and it's obviously a Shia group, so it's closely linked to the religious community links. But it's been there and has been built up and promoted by Iran since the early days of the revolution, so over the last 40 years. And it is a highly capable group. It's more than just a terrorist group, it's a political party, it's a major part of the fabric of Lebanon, not necessarily a constructive part of that political entity, but it has a stronghold in the south, and its mission is anti-Israel, supported with money, with weaponry, with training and ideology by Iran at every step of the way.
I mean, you're very clear there on, I guess, the kind of closeness of the relationship between Iran and Hezbollah. We're seeing Israel striking against Hezbollah in quite audacious ways at times with the pager explosions. How worried are you that at some point Iran's going to come in?
I think the sort of the hard line between war and peace that we talk about isn't really there anymore, is it? I mean, there is a conflict going on between Israel and Iran. It's happening through proxies. It's happening in other theatres. It's happened directly through missile exchanges
so it's already
back in
happening,
April.
In a sense, is what you're saying.
Yeah. So what does a full-blown war actually mean? They don't have a land border. They're not. The two armies aren't going to clash, and Iran wouldn't do that anyway because it would come off worse. So. What is incredibly worrying is this escalation with Hezbollah has got a long way to go and could go a lot further. And that's why there's so much diplomacy going on. And of course, this week with everyone in New York, there was an opportunity for a lot of diplomatic effort to try to get the sides to de-escalate and to prevent the worst sort of regional crisis developing.
How unusual is it? Are you talking about the kind of, I guess, the long-standing kind of tussle between these two powers? Is what we're seeing considerably more dangerous, more concerning than that sort of everyday sort of tussle that you're talking about?
Absolutely. I mean, this is the worst it's been.
Worst it's been ever? Or?
Well, it's the worst it's been in terms of the extent of the conflict between Iran and Israel. So, of course, Israel's invaded Lebanon before and had major, very destructive war against Hezbollah, and that's gone blown hot and cold, as have other conflicts. But across a number of fronts now, this conflict has really ramped up, and I think that it's not necessarily to Iran's advantage. People are very worried about what Iran can do in the region, but I guess if you're a decision maker in Tehran, you're probably a bit scared about what the situation is bringing.
That's very interesting, and thank you very much for being on the programme and talking us through the evacuation and also, of course, potential, I shouldn't say evacuation, the potential getting people out of Lebanon and also the wider issues in the region as well. Thank you.
Okay.
Coming up next on The Politics Hub. The RMT, headed up by our panellist Mick Lynch, agrees a pay deal, another success for the government in ending strikes, or has Labour caved in to union demands? I'm sure Mick and Ed might have some views on that one. Plus, Ed's old pal Michael Gove is to be the new editor of The Spectator. How will he use one of the most powerful pulpits in the world of conservatism? Hello, welcome back. Now to a story that is of great interest to at least one of our panellists. Rail workers have voted to accept a pay offer, ending a 2-year-long dispute which has brought disruption to train services. The RMT, led by Mick Lynch, said its membership backed a 1-year rise of 4.5% at Network Rail and increases at train operators of 4.75% for the last year and 4.5% for 2024 to 25. It's the latest dispute to be resolved since Labour came to power in July, promising to end stalemates over pay deals that have led to industrial action across other key services, including the NHS. Right, let's chat to Mick and Ed, shall we? Mick, what's your reaction to this?
Well, we've got a reasonable deal. It hasn't kept up with inflation during this 3-year period of the dispute. We've been in action since May 22, so it's 2.5 years. We didn't have demands particularly. People have to go back. The Tory government attacked us. They said that they're going to take thousands of our members' jobs. They were going to chop up their terms and conditions. They were going to get rid of the railway pension scheme that we fought to defend. And they wanted to close all the ticket offices, if you remember that. We successfully defeated that. So this deal is a no-strings-attached deal. It's below the rate of inflation during that period. So they haven't caved into us. They've just got rid of the Tory nonsense that we were putting up with, which we've seen right across the economy with NHS workers, all sorts of people, even barristers were out on strike at one stage. So it concludes a dispute that was very painful, but we think it's successful. We've not given up any of our jobs and any of our conditions that the people were looking for. It was a nonsense dispute created by people like Grant Shapps, if you remember him. I don't know what he's doing now. He's probably looking for a job at the Spectator or somewhere. Dreamed up by people who knew nothing about the railway, knew nothing about business. So we've got another dispute to deal with, the Royal Fleet Auxiliary. We're hoping that the Ministry of Defence will come to that and they'll be involved in this scene in the Lebanon, perhaps. So if we get some common sense from the government, which I think we are starting to get on these pay deals, we'll get a reasonable settlement and we can get back to work.
Well, I hesitate to take on Mick Lynch because he knows a lot more about how the railways work than I do. But I do take issue with the fact that he says it was a Tory government that came up with these ideas of how to modernise the railways. I mean, it was rail management and rail managers who have views about how the rails
should be
run and want to modernise working practices.
Well,
when you talk about thousands of jobs being taken, if you're going to modernise rail services, some jobs might have to change. You don't necessarily have to reduce the toll. You don't necessarily have to reduce the workload. And anyone watching this who goes to a train station knows that probably they're buying their train ticket on their app. So you're used to seeing kind of train ticket offices closing because you're used to going to a ticket machine or buying it on your phone. So there are clearly ways that you can modernise the railways. And what you don't want, you know, I'm all for unions. You know, I'd love to see a perfect trade union that campaigned for the right salaries for its workers, but also met management halfway and said things are changing. We're living in the 21st century and things have to change and modernise and adapt.
We were never invited to do that, though. It was
when I'm in charge of the railways, when the Tory government comes in 2029,
we'll get in public ownership.
I'll be at the table with you.
For an ex-MP.
I'll be at the table with you.
It was dreamt up.
You to suggest some modernising practice, which I suggest you probably never have done to the management.
I bet we have. I've done loads of modernisations.
What modernisation have you done for the railway?
I worked for the most modern railway in Britain. I worked for Eurostar and we come up with loads of innovations when we were there.
Oh, really?
Yeah. The best innovation we've got, though, is to get rid of the private operators who've been leeching money. £10 billion worth of profit have left the industry since privatisation. So there's the best innovation. Get rid of the profiteers and the parasites that have been on our industry.
Making a profit if they're running a good service.
But they were putting no capital at risk.
Our supermarkets run a great service.
I'm going to be out of a job by the time you two have finished.
That's because we're modernising this show and we don't need a presenter anymore.
I need a union helper
Nick and I can just do it by ourselves, and that's just an example of the 21st century.
Well, the general election left scores of senior Conservatives without gainful employment. That includes a large number who decided not to fight the election at all. Well, one of them has landed one of the most coveted jobs in the Conservative ecosystem. It's this man, Michael Gove, who was at the centre of the entire Conservative journey from opposition to government and back again, with a number of cabinet jobs and a pivotal role in the Brexit vote along the way. Well, he is now going to become the new editor of The Spectator, taking over from Fraser Nelson, who's stepping down next month. And it's going to put Mr Gove in a position to be a key opinion former as the Conservatives work to get back into power. Right, let's talk to Mick and Ed again, shall we? Ed, what do you make of this? I mean, it's a great job for Mr Gove.
Yeah, well, the new owner of The Spectator is a guy called Paul Marshall, who's paid a lot of money to buy this magazine because he wants to have political influence. Of course, he's behind GB News as well. Michael Gove's been very close to Paul Marshall for many years. So lots of people said it wouldn't surprise us if Paul Marshall bought The Spectator, that Michael Gove would become the editor, and lo and behold, he has. And you're right, it's an influential organ, and he will use it to provoke and cause mischief. I mean, people forget that Michael Gove, as well as being a seasoned politician, is also mischievous. He's the kind of person, for example, who'd give Mick Lynch a column. That's how mischievous he might be.
Talking about influence, there's lots of talk in Westminster about how he is backing Kemi Badenoch for the leadership. Do you think that The Spectator might, I guess, try and row behind a candidate, try and influence the race?
Well, not only do I know nothing about the railways, I know nothing about editing a magazine, but I suspect Michael would be too shrewd to nail The Spectator's colours to the mast of a particular...
GB News will drive that journal to the right, and I'm sure Michael Gove will go along with that as long as he gets the right kind of salary. I mean, Liz Truss called him the snake. I don't know if he's going to start...
Well, hold on, Mick. You've just lost us there by citing Liz Truss in defence of your argument. I think people should also remember Michael Gove was a journalist before he was a politician.
And went on strike.
And went on strike when he worked for the
Aberdeen... He shed his skin.
Aberdeen Press and Journal. And I think you will see Michael Gove will treat the Spectator with the respect it deserves as a journalistic organ, not as a political
salary.
Not as a political.
I'm looking forward to your column. That's what I'm really looking forward to.
I want him to declare the salary.
Still to come on the Politics Hub. Well, Labour ended their conference in the traditional way, playing the socialist anthem, the red flag. Is it a relic of a long disappeared past? And does the current Labour government live up to its ideals? We'll discuss that next.
I'm Katie Spencer and I'm Sky News' arts and entertainment correspondent. When you think of Glastonbury, it's mud you want and music. They're going to cross to us live in a minute. Okay. Thank you so much. Brad Pitt is now a prolific producer behind the scenes.
It's not a mystery to me. We always were capable of doing this.
Oh, they're wonderful children as an audience.
Who did that? Maverick here on the red carpet. I'm so excited, Tom Cruise. This is the story of the night.
It's the little independent film that could.
We take you to the heart of the stories that shape our world.
Nor have I ever struck any woman in my life.
There's this illusion of power.
Are you feeling well?
I remember covering the Oscars and that now infamous moment, the Will Smith slap. Nobody could quite believe that it had happened. You can tell from these crowds just how excited people are for the return of Pride.
These actors playing the lead roles were born long after the Sex Pistols broke up.
Are you pleased that you did say yes to the job?
I've never regretted it.
As a team, we've interviewed some of the biggest stars in the world. It can be incredibly surreal being swept up in their world, but we try to give you an honest sense of how these people really are.
Okay, I'll talk to you.
Don't leave me!
Yeah, okay.
There's no easy goodies. There's no easy baddies.
I've had a great time here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Welcome to the world.
Our new podcast, starting now. It's very exciting. Every week, we'll be reporting from the world's trouble spots.
We get to hold those in positions of power accountable, and we get to ask the questions that the audience, the listeners, want to know about.
And that's why it is so important that people tune in, come along for the road, come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
Play Sky News.
From the Sky News Centre at 7.
Now that you're up to date, we can go into a bit more detail.
Things can change incredibly quickly.
Taken by surprise.
Have you ever known a moment like this in British politics before?
Yes.
Cheers. We'll start with breaking news.
Let's get the latest on the ground.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better.
Hello, welcome back to the Politics Hub. Well, Labour conference came to a close today with the familiar refrains of the red flag, the socialist crowd pleaser that the Labour Party adopted as its official anthem when it was founded and performed every year, come rain or shine.
The people's flag is deepest red.
Socialism. Hip hip!
I love it. It's one of those. It's like kind of at weddings or like when at football matches when they sing the national anthem, and you kind of work out whether to really go for it or to just kind of mime along. I don't know. Red flag. Is it still relevant for this Labour Party today? Do you think?
I don't think for the Labour Party leadership, but it is for the members. I mean, it's never been my favourite song. Singing along to a Christmas carol with those lyrics is a bit odd. But I think it's communal singing has probably died out is the problem. It gets a bit embarrassing when there's only 3 people know the words or want to sing. So if they're going to get it going, they need to have a bit of practice beforehand. Everything else by the spin doctors is practiced. But
I think it's a great tradition. I hope the Labour Party never drops it.
Well, they used to do more singing.
You lose it. You lose all these things in the mist of time, but it's still a very good link to the past. And when the Labour Party is celebrating its 400th anniversary and they're still singing it, it's not being done by an AI bot, I'm all for that.
What would you sing if you wasn't the red flag then? What song would you introduce?
Anarchy in the UK. That'd be my one.
I'm surprised they didn't get Taylor Swift this year into singing.
Oh, can you imagine?
That would have been good.
They should get a choir to sing it then.
Yeah,
they should make it a moment. They should have a guest star every year.
Yeah.
Everyone could get really worked up. Who's going to sing the red flag this year?
There was a lot of DJ sets at Labour conference, I did notice.
I gather there was some MPs really distinguished themselves in knowing the lyrics from obscure songs without looking at the lyrics. When the Tory party also has big karaoke nights. You remember Therese Coffey, the former Deputy Prime Minister? Her karaoke night in Westminster at the end of every kind of parliamentary session was a sort of famous Tory.
Yeah, but you'll only have
gathering.
washed-up celebrities this year. You won't have any A-list
Tories,
celebrities.
it's always been the way that Labour gets. In fact, they should have had Noel and Liam Gallagher. That should have been the first Oasis reunion. Should have been, particularly in Liverpool. It would have really got people back out.
We're out of time. I could listen to this chat for a lot more time. I want to know what's your karaoke song? You've got 9 seconds.
I can't sing for toffee.
That's it from us tonight. I'll see you tomorrow at 7. Up next, it's UK Tonight.
Yeah.